All right, everyone. We'll be going live in just a second. I appreciate your patience. It seems that I changed user IDs on Chrome last night and wiped out all of my bookmarks that I'd previously set up. So I just had to put them in all over again. Give me just a couple seconds and I'll bring up the live screen. All right. Let me just check and make sure my camera is up. Not at the moment. Interesting. Let me put the screen back, the soon screen back up, and we'll figure this out. Oh, I know what's going on. No, I don't. All right, everybody, I'm going to stop the stream, fix this crap, and then I'll be right back. All right. Third time's a charm, right? Here we go. Good. Good. We've got it. All right, let me just get the chat up. And sneak it into place. All right. As you can tell, this is on my second live stream ever. And I got off to a bad start, but I'm glad you all are with me. So, what are we doing today? This is another stream like my video last week, and I'll have the link in the description, about the complete inability of the United Kingdom to stay sane, to stay a Western civilized country. Over the past few weeks, they have gone further and further into a deep and dark hole, and I am very curious as to see just what would happen to be able to pull them out. Personally, I think nothing short of a severe and significant regime change can help start to bring about any kind of a real course correction in the UK. There is a candidate out there right now who may be running for prime minister not too long. I believe his last name is Anthony Hogg, or I know Hogg is the last name. It might even be Mogg. But he is definitely a very interesting and I think very well-suited figure to what's going on out there. And maybe, who knows? So anyway, let's get into it. We have Count Dankula and his conviction yesterday, conviction of hate speech, and he will be sentenced on the 23rd of April. Now, what exactly is hate speech for such a thing, you may ask? Shitposting, basically. I know I don't tend to curse on this channel, but that one I think I'm due. Yeah, Scottish YouTube personality Count Dankula, real name Mark Meacham, was found guilty at Glasgow Sheriff Court Tuesday of a hate crime and potentially faces 2 months in prison after recording a video of his girlfriend's dog doing Nazi salutes. Now, initially, when this case was brought, there was talk of him being eligible for up to a year in jail. Although this does say prison. In the U.S., there is a distinction, of course. I don't know if that's the case in the U.K. But still, he is going to go to jail. Maybe for a few days, maybe for a couple of weeks, but he's going to jail. And this is simply because he taught his girlfriend's dog, Buddha, in 2016, how to raise its paw in return for a treat. And what were the phrases that that dog was responding to? Well, something that was fairly controversial, but still, in the context of things, it was a pure joke. He was telling the dog to say, to raise its paw when he would say things like, "Gas the Jews" and "Sieg Heil." I've seen the video. You should look up the video. It's rather cute. I'll try to put the link in the description when I'm done. It's hilarious. It really is. But we're Americans. We have the right to free speech. We're used to being able to say what we want, when we want it, as long as it's not a call to violence, and as long as it's not sedition. Or no, not sedition. Call to violence. I don't remember the other one now. That's strange. You'll be able to tell me. But yeah. So hello, Dancing Dove. It's very nice to have you here. Very nice to have you here. But yes, it's insane. And so Americans' First Amendment rights are very well delineated and very well taken care of here in this country. They have no First Amendment in the United Kingdom. So they can be arrested for pretty much anything the government decides is hate speech or will incite violence. Now, these categories are incredibly broad. And as you can see, merely teaching a pug to raise its paw in regards to hearing Sieg Heil and Gas the Jews, there was a person who lodged a complaint against Meechin, and that was enough to put him in jail. Explaining how a simple joke had been taken out of context, Meechin said, "What they should have realized from the start is realize how ridiculous this entire thing is. Okay, he's just a shit poster, he's an edgy comedian. There are famous comedians who have done much worse than me, like Frankie Boyle, and you don't see them getting arrested. The thing which makes it so ridiculous is that this is over a joke. I'm a YouTuber. I made the joke for a laugh. The video for a laugh, excuse me. But then people wanted to misrepresent that. Speaking to journalists waiting outside the court, waiting for the verdict before he went inside, Meechin blasted the police and mainstream media for, you're going to love this, having colluded before his arrest, allowing journalists to set up outside his home to photograph and record him being taken away by officers. Yes, they actually made an arrest of a YouTuber who taught a dog how to Nazi salute to a couple of Nazi phrases to be photographed as if he was a major criminal on his way being let out the door. Excuse me. Green Mountain Dark Magic. Incredible coffee. They treated it as a major social event. And his name's been dragged through the mud for 2 years now because of this. He hasn't been able to get a job. He's persona non grata because of this. And that is the UK penal system, or judicial system, at play, folks. There are 9 to 10 people a day in the UK who are being arrested for quote-unquote hate speech right now on Twitter, Facebook, or in person. Mainly social media, though. 9 a day. Up 900% over last year, arrests are. 900%. That's what they're doing. So let's move on. You may remember this from last week when Martin Sellner, Lauren Southern, and Brittany Pettibone, in reverse order there, were all refused entrance into the UK over the weekend in regards to supposed terrorist activities they had been involved in the past or were going to be involved in. And Sellner's terrorist activity was he was going to give a speech about free speech on Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. Speaker's Corner being a centuries old venue for saying whatever you want, covered by law, but obviously covered by law as far as the UK authorities want it to be covered. If they don't like it, then it's not covered anymore. Brittany Pettibone was going to interview Tommy Southern, a former right-wing UK political party head and now a citizen journalist, and Lauren Southern, who is also a citizen journalist, excuse me, who last time she was there handed out some flyers that said Allah is a gay god, and she had a rainbow flag on the card as a way of saying, hey, Allah is open to everyone. Well, obviously, in Islam, gays are not open to practice. So, yeah, that didn't go over so well. And when she tried to enter the country again, she was denied, saying that she had engaged in terrorist activity in the past. Martin Sellner, in case you didn't know, is the head of Generation Identity in Europe, a identitarian political group. I'm not saying I agree with identitarians, but they are a direct result of the bending over backwards of Western European countries like Germany and the UK, technically not a European country, but still, in giving themselves over to the Muslim immigrants and the Islamic faith and letting them run roughshod all over their citizenry. I'm having a problem with the word citizen today. So anyway, why were these three banned? There's a bit down here I want to find. It's right here. Nick Lowles, chief executive of the anti-racism campaign group Hope Not Hate, says there has been a shift in those who the UK government considers to be a threat. He says that during the last 2 to 3 years, the government has taken a very strong position against hardline neo-Nazis, extreme Holocaust deniers, banning many who've attempted to enter the UK. Okay, I can see that, especially with the history Germany has with England and Nazi invasion, almost invasion of England during World War II. The invasion wasn't going to happen, but that's a story for a much, much later segment. But they did bomb the living hell out of London. So, yeah, there's bad blood there, and I understand that. What's new about the banning of generation identity activists such as Martin Sellner, Brittany Pettibone, and their increasingly alt-right friend Lauren Southern, not character assassination at all, is that the government has signaled that it's going after softer targets on the hard right. Well, so if it's a soft target, is it hard right? And Lauren Southern is not alt-right, by the way, in my opinion. She has specifically denied being alt-right. If she shifted to that position recently, I hadn't known. These are people who have huge reach on social media. They are peddlers of online hate, and as our recent State of Hate report highlighted, the online reach of right-wing hate preachers can have disastrous consequences. Like what? Like what? Example. Citation needed. The irony that the far right have long called for the British government to take firm control of our borders. Now they are doing just that. Fair enough. Fair enough. I get that is a valid point insofar as if you're protecting England from dangerous people, not ideas that they consider dangerous. And why are they considered dangerous? Because the Muslim population will lose it, because these people are there to provide a speech about not being held to a standard of hate speech that is so broad, so poorly delineated that anyone can be picked up for it at any time, especially if they say something against a Muslim individual. Say like when the Rotherham rape gang story broke, and there were people who tweeted to the Rotherham Police Department, hey, You knew these guys were out there. You knew they were Pakistanis. Did you do this just because of racism? Those people were investigated for hate crimes, for hate speech, because they dare mention the nationality of the perpetrators in the case. I'll finish up with this. Islamist and right-wing extremism is reaching into our communities through sophisticated propaganda and subversive strategies, creating and exploiting vulnerabilities that can ultimately lead to acts of violence and terrorism. Well, I'll give him that. I'll give him that. Although I don't know about the right-wing extremism. It hasn't shown to be any terrorist acts on the right wing yet. But it seems like the Islamic wing, they're pretty good for the terrorism stuff. Pretty good. So, what about people being banned from the UK? Is there a lot of that? Is this really something that we should keep a tab on? Well, there's actually a wiki article that does keep tabs on people banned from entering the UK. The Home Office, the United Kingdom Government Department, has from August 2005 to 31 March 2009 excluded 101 individuals from the UK for having engaged in unacceptable behavior. Now that's between 2005 and 2009. It's geared up since then. There is a list of these people. I won't go into great detail, but you can see United States, Russia, Pakistan, Russia, United States. Here's a few more. Iran, United States, Jamaica, Canada. Can you believe that? Israel, United States, Zimbabwe. And here we get into the home stretch. United States. Here's Robert Spencer, who we all know. Yes. Quite a list there, folks. Quite a list. That is an up-to-date run, by the way. That has more people than were listed in the original 2001 to 2008. Now, just want to point out one thing here. This is the vast majority of reason for ban. Considered to be engaging in unacceptable behavior by seeking to foment, justify, or glorify terrorist violence in furtherance of particular beliefs and fostering hatred that might lead to inter-community violence. So you go from fomenting, justifying, or glorifying terrorist violence to fostering hatred that might lead to inter-community violence. That might lead. First of all, fostering hatred, that's pretty broad. And then that might lead. Very, 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 very broad. So as you can see, they pretty much have reason to kick off anybody that they want to with no trouble whatsoever. It's scary is what it is. It's very scary. Now, my wife and I had been planning a trip to the UK for some time. We haven't discussed it completely yet, but I'm of the mind that I'm going to bail. I do not want to give the United Kingdom my dollars, our dollars, to support their government, to support their social system when it is so incredibly broken and needs fixing. I think a boycott may be the way to go. Not saying for sure, just that's the way I'm thinking. I got a lot of good comments on a YouTube comment I posted on Styx Hexenhammer 666's last video about Count Dankula, and it seems like the vast majority of people are behind me on that. Okay, so what about this inter-community violence? Where does that come from? Well, here you go. Muslims riot, assault people with weapons to shut down free speech at London Speaker's Corner. Now, what is going on here that they had to riot about a speech? Well, as it says here, it was free speech. And what was it free speech about? Free speech. It was a lecture, a speech, again, that word, to be given by Martin Zellner about the freedom of speech, or lack thereof, in the UK and how it needs to be brought back. And he was obviously prevented from giving that speech. So Tommy Robinson said that he would give that speech. And he tried his best and was shut down the first time, but he managed to get back out there, and this time he gave it. Well, partially. Here's what happened. Now notice what the police are doing. Keep an eye on where their attention is focused. Notice who's intercepted here. You can see there's one pretty big troublemaker in that group. Yes. The police, as near as I can tell, were much more concerned about keeping the right wing, if you will, protesters, the freedom of speech protesters, back and I'm sorry about the chair, excuse me. Keeping them back and keeping them away from the Muslim agitators, as opposed to the Muslims being forced backwards by the police. The Muslims who were the aggressors. As you'll notice, one of those guys brought a weapon, which was hilariously taken away from him by a lady in that video. I got a real kick out of that. But yeah. Who were the aggressors? The Muslims. Who were the people that the police were pushing back and trying to corral? The people backing Tommy Robinson. There's no bias there whatsoever. There's nothing going on favoring one group over another. Keep in mind that the police totally shut down Tommy the last time he tried to speak. They walked him off Speaker's Corner. They interviewed him, tried to take down all of his information to file a police report about him showing up to speak on Speaker's Corner. That's the UK for you, folks. And London specifically. Remember, Sadiq Khan is the mayor of London, and he is a real piece of work. Again, look at my video from last week if you want some more information on him. Okay, we're going to get into part of the Telford scandal. This was very, very disturbing, as you may know. The Telford grooming gang, or rape gang, or rape and murder gang scandal, as it has become to known, is very, very significant. It is a list of rapes against mainly young white girls, as young as 11, that went on in the town of Telford, which is in Shropshire, as I believe, that started in the 80s. And there were reports after reports given to the police about what was going on, and they did nothing. And the reasoning behind that is most likely exactly the same as the reasoning behind Rochford and Rotherham. They didn't want to seem racist. The girls were treated as prostitutes, even though they were as young as 13. Many of them were in the care of the state, and they were not given their basic human rights as human beings. So here's one such story that has come out since the ring has been exposed. I was pregnant at 13. The father could have been any of 20 men. 12 more victims come forward in Telford sex abuse scandal. One of the 12 new victims of an alleged pedophile ring in Telford. These are not pedophiles. These are groomers. These are gang groomers. It's different. Grooming gangs are different than pedophile rings. I can't go into the specifics right now, but a lot of it has to do with ideology and the way they're arranged. A alleged pedophile ring in Telford has spoken of how she was picked up off the streets as a child and sexually abused by a string of men. The shocking revelation came as local MP Lucy Allen claims she has been swamped with calls from people telling her they were targeted by the sex gangs. The victim, who along with 11 others has gone to police with her allegations, told the Mirror, "I was first picked up on the streets by an older Pakistani man when I was 12. I had a home life, and he was charming at first, but he soon raped me. There's a picture of Lucy Allen, the MP. I tried to fight him off, but not long afterwards he passed me to his friends. By 13, I was pregnant, and the father could have been any one of 20 men. The abuse didn't stop when I gave birth. In fact, it got worse. The most horrific night was when 2 of them took me up the Wrekin Hill and violently raped me. My teachers or social workers never asked any questions, so I thought what was happening to me was normal. Being abused by gangs of men just seemed part of teenage life in Telford. There are stories of families who had to take their daughters out of the country in order to save them from these gangs because there was nowhere to go. The groomers, the rapists were so well interconnected, so well networked that you couldn't hide. And they had your number. And if you changed your number, they'd get it again. They were relentless. Here's the part that I wanted to cover. West Mercia Assistant Chief Constable Martin Evans last night confirmed a number of victims had come forward this week following the Mirror's shocking revelations about the Shropshire town. He said, "We are pleased they have had the confidence to come forward, and we are ensuring their reports are investigated and the appropriate support is in place for them." Where was that 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago? Chief Constable, why weren't you covering it then? Why has this huge scandal involving hundreds and hundreds of young girls had to come to light before you will suddenly say that you are investigating and appropriate support is in place? That's pathetic. That's beyond pathetic. That's criminal, in my opinion. The reports we have received this week relate to non-recent child sexual exploitation offenses. Non-recent, which means the reports from all of these girls who were abused, who were raped over this 40-year period, now you're paying attention to them. Now they're coming forward and you're saying, oh, well, maybe we need to look into that. Thank you for your candor, you slut. Last part. Our message to offenders who perpetrate these horrific crimes is, we will investigate any reports we receive and go wherever the evidence takes us to secure a conviction against you. Right. Right. I read a story about one young gal who had brought charges against the head of the rape gang. And he ran the rape house where the girls were sold to different men over the night. And she was caught in the car with him on several occasions. A 13-year-old girl in the car with a 46-year-old man. Not one question asked about why she was there, what he was doing with her. They let it go. So she said that she had saved clothes from the night of the rape with DNA samples and turned them into the police. The police lost the clothes, magically lost the clothes in a rape case involving a young girl, and then said, well, we can't do anything because it's your word against his. Technically they're right. Technically they are right. But why are they right? Because they threw away the evidence. Can't imagine why that happened. Now, this one last part I want to get to. This is an older case. This is about a Rotherham grooming gang survivor, and Rotherham was the first of these. Actually, I think Rochdale was the first of these to come out, but Rotherham was seen as the granddaddy of all because 1,500 girls were assaulted during that time. And that's not counting each girl who was assaulted multiple times. So imagine the number of rape counts you actually have. But this has an interesting take on it. As a Rotherham's grooming gang survivor, I want people to know about the religious extremism which inspired my abusers. Grooming gangs are not like pedophile rings. Instead, they operate almost exactly like terrorist networks with all the same strategies. She raises 2 interesting points here. First, however big or small the problem of grooming gang crime is, it is big enough to warrant national concern, not only because of the severity of the crimes, but because of the degree of terror and threats to life involved. Remember, in the Telford gang, one girl was burnt to death along with her mother and sister when one of the abusers set their house ablaze in the middle of the night to keep her from telling what was going on. And then the gang used that incident, as a way of um, uh, throttling the cries of abuse by the girls they were still using, keeping them from going to the police. It was very effective, as you might imagine. But because of the degree of terror and threats to life involved, this really does devastate lives, families, and communities. We don't even talk about the non-survivors. In November 2017, the Swedish government held a meeting where they stated that sexual violence is being used as a tactic of terrorism, and as such, it was recognized as a threat to Sweden's national security. The link between terrorism and rape undertaken by Islamist gangs was not being ignored. They called for counter-extremism education. This sounds like a balanced and intelligent governmental response to me. And again, very straightforward. This part right here. Religious indoctrination is a big part of the process of getting young men involved in grooming gang crime. Excuse me. Religious ideas about purity, virginity, modesty, and obedience are taken to the extreme until horrific abuse becomes the norm. It was taught to me as a concept of othering. Now, othering is a very well-known propaganda technique where you take the party you want to denigrate and you first reduce them to a one-dimensional image. In Nazi Germany, it was the Jews as the reason Germany was plunged into a depression during the um, um, Weimar Republic times, and that they were keeping Germany from advancing. In America, Donald Trump is being othered by being called racist or homophobic or sexist. Those are othering terms. Here, this is a very, very brutal case of othering. Muslim girls are good and pure because they dress modestly, covering down to their ankles and wrists and covering their crotch area. They stay virgins until marriage. They are our girls. White girls and non-Muslim girls are bad because you dress like slags. Slags is a European, a British euphemism for slut. You show the curves of your bodies. Showing the gap between your thighs means you're asking for it, and therefore you're immoral. White girls sleep with hundreds of men. You are the other girls. You are worthless and you deserve to be gang raped. Well, they wouldn't sleep with hundreds of men if they weren't being attacked by Pakistani grooming gangs, by Muslim grooming gangs. You jerk. I almost used another word there. This hateful religious hypocrisy strikes people to their very core. This is where I have a problem with the young lady's message. Let me get into it. But it's far from unique. My main perpetrator quoted scriptures from the Quran to me as he beat me. However, almost identical scriptures about the stoning to death of virgins who don't scream when they are raped can also be found in the Bible. The problem isn't the text itself, it's how fundamentally interpreted. In fact, there are many cases of Bible quotes being used to justify terrible human injustices like the enslavement of people from Africa, anti-Semitism, and violence towards LGBT plus people. Okay, here's the thing. Hey Tia, that's all right. It didn't start on time anyway, so you didn't miss as much as you might have. We just went over Count Dankula, a slight update on the Lawrence Southern, Selner, and Pettibone thing, and then a video on a Muslim riot at Speaker Corner. I'll put the links to all these in the description, of course, once this is published, so you'll be able to follow it all. So anyway, back to this. The problem isn't the text itself, it's how it's fundamentally interpreted. Yes, there is fundamental interpretation of the Bible, of the of the Old Testament, um, and that goes on. Sure, sure, that goes on. There are Orthodox Jews who have very strict interpretations of their holy book, but they don't go around stoning people to death or hanging them for being gay. The Westboro Baptist Church is the worst example of religious fundamentalism in the U.S., and they just have a virulent hatred of gays. They've never killed a gay, they've never attacked a gay. They just hate them. So, this part about the Bible quotes being used to justify terrible human injustices, yeah, they were in the past. Christianity had a reformation. Slavery was stopped in the 1800s. The LGBT community has been embraced by the Republican Party. Remember the 2016 Republican National Convention? Trump brought an openly gay man on stage, and he got applause from the audience, a roaring round of applause. So, yes, the Bible's been used for various injustices, but not anymore. Meanwhile, the Quran, Islam, still does it. Still stones people to death. Still hangs people. Still cuts off their hands for stealing. This is the reality. So you're drawing a false equivalence here, and I don't appreciate it. I understand you've been through a terrible ordeal. This young lady has gone through what I could never consider to be even survivable. And she has a wonderful take on how this can be um, dealt with. But let's stick with what's really the problem here. I'll finish up with this. Most grooming gang survivors I know absolutely condemn anti-Islamic hate and were uncomfortable with English Defence League protests. EDL is an anti-immigration wing in the UK political parties. We certainly don't want random attacks on all Muslims. You can't cure harm with more harm. Free-thinking men from Pakistani Muslim backgrounds, like Nazir Afzal, agree, and many deal with all of this incredibly graciously. Okay, that is, I feel, a very beautiful statement that she does not hold hate in her hearts against the religious ideology that subjected her to that horrible abuse, that disgusting abuse. And I applaud her for that. I don't know if I would be so open-minded. I really don't. But, and the person that she references here, Nazir Afal, that is a second-generation Pakistani immigrant. He is, excuse me, a Pakistani immigrant, second generation, who has risen to a role of great respect and power in the UK judicial system. He was a chief judge for a while and chief spokesman for a national police organization until he felt he couldn't speak out anymore about Islam, and he wanted to step down in order to be able to speak his mind. How much he's able to speak his mind anymore, I don't know. One thing I noticed in his wiki page is he is an expert in de-radicalization, which is of course incredibly important in the UK, considering how much of that is going on right now in the ghettos of the UK that are pure Muslim communities. Sorry about the chair. So that is basically it. We have covered everything that was on this list. Now, if you like, I'll leave it up to the chat. I have a few pieces on gun control in the U.S. that I had prepared for a different video. So I'll leave it up to you guys. We've been on for about 40 minutes. So if you need to go somewhere and you don't want to waste your time any longer on this trivia, then please feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'll put the break sign up, and I will come back and get the pieces together, and we'll go over them. Yeah, Tia, she is an amazing girl. To be able to go through that and not be just debilitated by hate towards another group. That reminds me of a story. There's an author, I don't think anyone knows him anymore. He was very popular early in my generation and later on, named James Clavell. He wrote the book Shogun, um, which was immensely popular and made into a miniseries with, oh gosh, Richard. Okay, one upvote from Tia. Great. Um, Richard Chamberlain, which is a fantastic piece of work. It's great television at its finest. But he was a POW in a Japanese prisoner of war camp in World War II, and he was subjected to horrible abuse, just as major a brand of torture as you can conceive of. He um, he wanted to kill every Japanese he could see. He was able to get help after he got out of the prison camp and back to the United States by a therapist who knew what they were doing. And they recommended that he write out his abuse um, and get it on paper to help have a catharsis about what was happening. And he did, and it became a book called King Rat, which was about his torture in Japan. He realized that um, he wanted to know more about Japan and Japanese culture, and he did a deep dive into Japanese history, and he started writing these wonderful books about different periods in Japan. Shogun, obviously, being that period, and then he did one on um, the rise of the port of Hong Kong in China called Taipei, which is also a very interesting book, very well written. Fascinating author. I met him obliquely once in Austin. Um, very, very big Texas kind of guy. Really cool. Oh, I can't imagine how angry you would be at that, tell you. Just, I can't imagine. I mean, I know that while my wife was working all the hours she was over the past 5 years, that I hardly saw her at all, and I found that difficult to deal with. But to not be able to at least say, well, she'll be home tonight or early this morning sometime, that I can't imagine. I can't imagine. Okay, so we've got a vote for the continuation. I'm going to put up the break sign, and then I will get those ready. So let me see if I can do the break sign properly without screwing things up. Let's see here. It didn't work. I'll do it the hard way. There we go. All right, I'll mute the microphone so you don't hear me cursing.
that the other important thing to realize is I'm not only going after the politicians here. I do see the fault with the FBI. I do see fault with the local PD. But realize what these politicians are trying to do, what Marco Rubio has tried doing recently, is shifting the blame off of him onto these people. And realize these politicians are the bosses of these government agencies, and they too, just as much, are at fault because they need to oversee these groups and make sure that they're doing their job correctly. Because when they don't, we see instances like my school happen.
Well, like
The other important thing to realize is I'm not only going after the politicians here. I do see the fault with the FBI. I do see fault with the local PD. But realize what these politicians are trying to do, what Marco Rubio has tried doing recently, is shifting the blame off of him onto these people. And realize these politicians are the bosses of these government agencies, and they too, just as much, are at fault because they need to oversee these groups and make sure that they're doing their job correctly. Because when they don't, we see instances like my school happen.
well, like
Yeah, I think that the other important thing to realize is I'm not only going after the politicians here. I do see the fault with the FBI. I do see fault with the local PD. But realize what these politicians are trying to do, what Marco Rubio has tried doing recently, is shifting the blame off of him onto these people. And realize these politicians are the bosses of these government agencies, and they too, just as much, are at fault because they need to oversee these groups and make sure that they're doing their job correctly. Because when they don't, we see instances like my school happen.
well, like
for me, I've always wanted to be politically active, but the one thing I've always been afraid of, and I think the one thing that everybody should be afraid of, is when you start working in Washington, when you start working in any elected official position where the people trust you, you have to work as a public servant. And I think, as has been said before, power inevitably corrupts. It's the citizens' duty to ensure that that doesn't happen. And that was my concern. And that's my main concern for anybody running. You can say everybody that starts running
I
believes that they
apologize
can do the
about
best for the
that. Thank you
community,
for
but when the
putting that
seeds of
up.
corruption and
I
these
forgot
lobbies
to
start coming
unmute
in
my
and they start seeing
microphone.
these dollar signs, they no longer hear your voice.
Again, I'm new
They
to
only
this, so
hear the voice
I'm
of
learning as
money
I
and the
go.
voice of
I will start over. You did not miss that much. So again, thank you so much for pointing that out, Green Badger. I really appreciate it. Yes. So what we're doing here is going over Daily Wire piece from 2 days ago, featuring David Hogg in a Twitter live event, Twitter roundtable that was sponsored by Twitter for survivors of the Parkland shooting, none of whom were in the building when the shooting took place. I understand they were students at from the shooting, but the word survivors is kind of sticking in my craw a little bit lately. Anyway, these are all students who are for gun control on this panel. Not one of them has an opposing view, which you go figure. They do reference one guy who says that they say he doesn't want to work with them, even though they trash him the whole time. So, gee, go figure. So anyway, this is David Hogg. We'll start with this. He is saying that it's not a Democrat or Republican issue, as he downplays the importance of how the local police, FBI, and school officials failed, yet claims Marco Rubio is responsible for all of them. This is quite interesting. And this is pure David Hogg, where he is basically incoherent in his point, and it's totally about his feelings. It has nothing to do with facts. So, let's play this. I apologize if the sound is a little low. I have everything turned up on this as much as I can, so you may have to turn up your volume a little bit as it comes in. Okay.
Yeah, I think that the other important thing to realize is I'm not only going after the politicians here. I do see the fault with the FBI. I do see fault with the local PD. But realize what these politicians are trying to do, what Marco Rubio has tried doing recently, is shifting the blame off of him onto these people. And realize these politicians are the bosses of these government agencies, and they too, just as much, are at fault because they need to oversee these groups and make sure that they're doing their job correctly. Because when they don't, we see instances like my school happen.
Yeah, there you have it. The head of the Broward County Sheriff's Office, the sheriff, not his fault because Rubio should have been overseeing him. The FBI tip line, or the actual agents who got the original report from the YouTuber who saw the "I want to be a professional school shooter" comment on his video, not their fault because Rubio wasn't overseeing them. And the school, not their fault because Rubio was overseeing them. Rubio wasn't riding herd over this disparate group of people when it's not his job. Unless someone had come to him and said, these people are not doing their job in your district, you need to go after them, you need to get them to step up to the plate and take care of this kid, it wasn't his responsibility. Yet, David Hogg lays it at his feet. Pathetic. But that's not what I really wanted to talk about. That's just one that infuriated me. This one right here. Hogg says that politicians have blood on their hands because they accepted money. Because they accepted money. Now, who do you think he means when he says accepted money? The NRA? Nah, I'm sure he doesn't mean the NRA. He just obliquely refers to them. But it's obvious from every statement he's made up till now, including at the town hall, that he believes that if you took money from the NRA, you have blood on your hands. So let's see this.
Of greed, and that's.
Oops, I need to back that up. That's when we found out there was no sound. Here we go.
For me, I've always wanted to be politically active, but the one thing I've always been afraid of, and I think the one thing that everybody should be afraid of, is
Oh, thanks,
when you
Great
start
Green Badger.
working
I
in
appreciate it.
Washington, when you start working in any elected official position where the people trust you, you have to work as a public servant. And I think, as has been said before, power inevitably corrupts. It's the citizens' duty to ensure that that doesn't happen. And that was my concern. And that's my main concern for anybody running. You can say everybody that starts running believes that they can do the best for the community, but when the seeds of corruption and these lobbyists start coming in and they start seeing these dollar signs, they no longer hear your voice. They only hear the voice of money and the voice of greed. And that's why these children have been allowed to be slaughtered in our schools, because these politicians haven't taken action because they've only seen the green money that this is, and now there's blood on their hands.
Now, how infuriating is this smug little shit? There I go cursing again. Excuse me. Still, I mean, look at that face. That is a, I won't use the word, but it begins with P and it ends with E, and it has bull in it. That is a P bull face. Uh, and he feels he has the courage of his convictions. And again, it's all about feelings. He feels that these politicians become corrupt because of lobbyist money. And to some extent, they do. To some extent, integrity in Washington is a perishable commodity, but not completely. But let's look at the blood on their hands, as he likes to say. This is why I wanted to do this part of the video. Okay. This is from OpenSecrets.org, Center for Responsive Politics. This is an amazingly left-wing site, but it does a good job of keeping track of campaign contributions. So it has its purpose. It also has its propaganda. Let's look right here. The National Rifle Association goes to great lengths and spends a huge sum of money to defend the right to bear arms. Is that a bad thing? It is opposed to virtually every form of gun regulation, not true, including restrictions on owning assault weapons. An assault weapon is an automatic weapon, and there are restrictions on the ownership of automatic weapons, heavy restrictions. In fact, you haven't been able to build any automatic weapons in the United States since the 80s. But and the NRA was in on that. But no, they have no reason to want to restrict the ownership of assault weapons. No. Retention of databases of gun purchases. Retentions of databases. The ATF keeps track of every gun transaction between you and a federally authorized firearms dealer. When I buy a firearm, either at a gun show, yes, at a gun show, or at a retail outlet, I have to sign and fill out a detailed federal form that shows that I am qualified to own that firearm. That firearm is registered by serial number in my name. And those have to be kept forever. Now, as far as retention of databases, I read recently that the Obama administration had wrong order of magnitude, 500,000 criminals deducted from the NICS database, the National Instant Criminal Background Check database, because they weren't sure if they should be there because their crimes were only state level as opposed to federal level, which doesn't matter. If it's a state level crime and fits the criteria, you're disqualified from owning the firearm. They don't see it that way, I guess. Background checks on purchasers at gun shows. Well, we just covered that. There are background checks at gun shows. There is no such thing as a gun show loophole. You can watch Steven Crowder's video on that. I'll try to get the link to that in the description if I can remember. And changes in the registration of firearms. Well, where there's already registration of firearms, I don't see what changes need to be made. So that's pretty much a straw man argument right there all the way across. So there's even more about the NRA if you want. That's even the same amount of propaganda going on. Why is that important? You'll see in a bit. So right here, contributions by the NRA for the 2016 election cycle. Direct contributions to political parties and candidates, I should say to candidates, excuse me, $1,085,100. Okay, so basically $1.1 million, ranking 490 out of nearly 19,000 contributors. Okay, who could beat that? Who could beat that? Someone who may have blood on their hands. Planned Parenthood. Excuse me, just a second. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Green Badger. Absolutely right on every step. Every step. So here we are. Profile for the 2016 election cycle for Planned Parenthood. Now notice there's nothing in the way box here, the margin, excuse me, about Planned Parenthood. Nothing about its goals, its aims, its duties. Nothing. You'd think there'd be a little something about the fact that it's the by far and away major abortion supplier in the United States, killing thousands of babies a day. But no, it doesn't seem to come up. So, what were the NRA, or excuse me, what were the Planned Parenthood contributions for the 2016 election cycle? 4.1 million. 4.1 million, ranking 118 out of 18,910. So that's 4 million. And what was that again for the NRA? 1 million? That's a bit of a disparity, wouldn't you say? Now, as far as lobbying and outside spending goes, you've got 3.188 million for lobbying and 54 million for outside spending. Obviously, the lobbying effort was about a third of that for Planned Parenthood, and certainly about half as much, or excuse me, a third as much in outside spending. But let's keep in mind, the NRA has millions and millions of members paying dues every month, or annual dues, or I should say annual dues, or lifetime dues, like me. I'm a lifetime member. And if I hadn't been before the Parkland shooting, I certainly would have been afterwards, just so you know. But Planned Parenthood is mainly put together by donations, local support, with some federal money. So they're not going to have the deep pockets to put out as much cash as the NRA. But still, $15 million for a partially government-funded program, not bad. Now you may be saying, why could a government program be able to lobby? They can't, but Planned Parenthood has a PAC that can lobby on their behalf. Tricky. Last bit here. Total recipients, I'm sorry, let me back up. This is money to candidates during the 2016 cycle. As you can see, the Dems were in the vast majority of donations, just like just like the NRA for Republicans. So there's no surprise there. Obviously, House races would get less since House races are cheaper to run. They're nowhere near as expensive as a Senate race. So let's look at the top recipients here. 2016 election cycle. Hillary Clinton at the top, 106,000. I have no idea why that's included there because there's no presidential candidate included in the NRA specs, which we'll see in a moment. But right here, 19,362 for Maggie Hassan, on down to 10,013 for Russ Feingold. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 recipients above $10,000 in the Democratic Party for Planned Parenthood. NRA. Two above $10,000. two: Roy Blunt and Barbara Comstock. That's it. So, who has blood on their hands again? Seriously? Planned Parenthood outspent the NRA in contributions 3-1, almost 4-1. Yet, David Hogg has a problem with Marco Rubio taking just a few thousand from the NRA when these people take more than that from Planned Parenthood. The Democrats, take more than that from Planned Parenthood. That's not hypocrisy at all. And that again shows you how these gun control advocates, are driven purely by feelings. They have no idea of the facts whatsoever. It took me like 5 minutes to put all this together once I found the OpenSecrets.org site. And again, it's very partisan in its outlook, but it's very accurate in its tallying of the facts, of the funds. So I will use it as a source. Remember, it's not their ideology, it's how they report the facts. So that's basically it. I appreciate everyone's coming. This was fun. I apologize again for the technical delays and forgetting to turn the microphone back on. I'm going to have to figure out a way to keep that status bar at the bottom of the page so I'm not forgetting things like that anymore. But I hope everyone got something out of this. Oh, that's right, Grain Badger. They do not consider unborn to be people. They are fetuses or clumps of cells. And you'll notice that no one uses the term fetus except pro-abortionists. That's a term that they came up with. Before then, it was the child, the unborn child, the baby. But you can't other something, as we discussed earlier. You can't other something by using the correct terminology. You have to make something up. So, anyway, we'll end it there. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments once this goes up. I'm not sure how long it takes YouTube to render these, but I will be adding links to everything in the description. So give it a little time before you jump in on it to the parts that you missed, especially Utia and Green Badger, so you can see what we went over before. All right. Take care, everyone. And as always, be well. Let me bring up the last screen here, which is 3. I'll be stopping the stream now. Again, take care, everybody.